Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today with Masechtas Gittin Daf Tes. We're going to begin in the middle of Daf Chesamid Beis by the two dots. Tanarban. Eved Shehevia Gito. So we mentioned in yesterday's daf briefly toward the end that when we mention the word get, it's not exclusive to a woman. That's Gittin Nashim. It really just means a document, and therefore a get could also be referencing a star for an eved to go free, a document of emancipation. So if you have an eved that produces a get, the kasabon is written on it that yourself and possessions are acquired to you. So so he will actually go free, but he will not acquire the nechassim. So on this, Rashi says as follows: Eved she'evi gito. As we're going to see in today's daf, it's necessary not just by a woman, but also when it comes to a shliach who brings a document of emancipation for an eved, he also needs to say b'fanei nechtav, and therefore to validate that this is a good document. Now, the requirement is that this document must be written in accordance to the laws of going free. It's not obviously it's not going to be the same as a document for a woman to go free from her marriage. So on this, Rashi says the neman hu al shichruro, he's believed to go free. Loimer b'fanav nechtav ein tzarich edim l'kaimo. You don't need any witnesses for that. However, debo edim Kishar Kim Stars. We're going to end up seeing why that he's not going to be believed, even though the document does say he should acquire certain money. Nonetheless, he's not believed for that. So we see from here this concept that we're going to be seeing soon called Palgin and Dibura, that on the document itself we could split it. That part of it will say he is free, but yet the other part which says he acquires possessions, he does not. So Iboilhu. So this the Gemara asks the following: Kol nechasai kenuyin l'cha. What if he just makes it as one statement? They're connected. Mahu. In that situation, what's the din? Says Rashi, Mi amrin atzmachom nechasai trei diburi ninhu. Do we say that they're still considered to be two separate things? Kol nechasai kiban debachad dibura asu asu leishichar atzmo matanas umatnas nechasim. Maybe the fact that they're linked, we should connect the two. Therefore, says Rashi, Hilchach, imahim and a high. If we believe him regarding the going free, so we should also believe him regarding the possessions, even though normally you need, as we just saw in Rashi, Adim, two witnesses for Kim Shtaros, but maybe in this situation, we are not going to say that. Now again, this doesn't apply to a woman because on a get, it's only for her to go free. And therefore, we believe the aid, the shliach, to say b'fanei nechtav. However, in this situation, there's two things, not only going free, but also acquiring money. So to acquire money, you would actually need two witnesses. So the question is, if they're written together, do we say, delo palgina dibora or dilma palginan? Are we able to split this language or not? So certainly, when it's mentioned in two separate statements, as we saw, so then we do split it. However, what happens if it's just one statement? Can you still split it? So Rabbi says, yeah, since you go free, we say you also acquire the possessions too. I understand why he goes free. It's just like a get isha that this person's believed to say b'fanei nechtav. El nechasim lo likni. He shouldn't acquire the possessions. Made to have a kim shtaras de alma. So why would we say it works? So Hadar Amar Abai says you're right. Mitar shelo kana nechasim lo kana atzmo. I don't split them, even though normally he really should be able to go free. But over here we're not going to say he goes free because we do not say palgin dibura. Okay. Now I can understand that he won't be able to get any of the possessions. So this is perhaps the machlokas of Palgin Dibura. According to Rabbi, he's saying that Okay, fine. This guy's not going to get any money, but at least he'll be able to go free because we do say Palgini Bora. So maybe that's goof of the machlokas whether we say Palgini Bora between Rabbi and Rabba. El Omer Rabba echad zeh echad zeh atzmo kana nechasim kana. Echad zeh echad zeh. In this case, in that situation, says Rashi, bein atzma or nechasai, bein kol nechasai, whether you said it separately, you said it together, the din is that he will go free, nechasim lo kana. So therefore, we will say Palgan Dibura, even in this situation where you mention the statement together, kol nechasai kenoilach. So even though you said it as one statement, nonetheless, he holds Palgan Dibura. Amalei Rav Adabar Ramasnal Rava. So he has a question according to Rava, who says that we do say Palgin Dibura. Come on, Rav Shimon. Must be you hold like Rav Shimon, Yamar Palgin Dibura. Then we split up the words. It not. How do we see Rav Shimon holds Palgin Dibura? A person does as follows. A kaisa, a person writes Kol Nechasav, all of his possessions, everything. Well, Avda to his slave, Yatza ben Chayrin. So the din is that he will be able to go free, says Rashi, She'afhu b'chol nechasim, because within the nechasim is him. If I'm giving you all my nechasim, you're also part of my property, and therefore because of that, you're going to go free. However, what if shir karka kol shehu lo yatz ben chayrin? So the Tanakh hold that if you left over a certain amount of karka, and Rashi says karka lav davka, it doesn't have to be karka, but you're not going to go free. Because I can understand in the beginning that the fact that you said everything, so therefore obviously I'm telling you to go free. Says Rashi, the nachas l'shira, you left over something. Amrinan l'didei namishir. Maybe he left over his eved too, that he's going to keep the eved. V'chi omer kol nachasai. When you said kol nachasai, l'chas to you ashar nachasim kaimer. It's other stuff. However, l'chanufi le'kaosi. He's actually just kind of flattering him. He's not really freeing him. Since he didn't say atzmacha, you, so it must be that he was really just making this statement. It's not really so flattering when he thought maybe he was going to end up walking away with all this money and his freedom. He ends up getting nothing. So, but perhaps that's what he said. The fact that he was shar kol shehu, he was leaving over a little bit in order to be able to still be able to keep his eved. So that's how the Tanakh interpret this. Rav Shimon Omer. Now Rav Shimon, again, we're going to try to establish holds Palgin Dibura. So Rav Shimon Omer, as we continue to test with Aleph, L'olam hu ben chayrin. Really, he will go free, says Rashi. D'maida goli goli, umaida lo goli lo goli. What he revealed, and he did. Basically, he was saying that he can go free. Ad sheyomer, until he specifies kol nechasin nesunim l'ploini avdi, that all my possessions I'm giving to my slave, chutz me'echad mirabu shebehen, excluding 1/10,000th, 1 myriad of it. What does that mean? So says Rashi that stam chutz, when you say the word except, midavar mu'at, except for a small thing, v'yafarish mahu mishayir, but you're not explaining what is the thing that you're excluding. The hasam amrin the echad mirabu kaimer hainu eved. So when he said that, and he didn't specify exactly what he's keeping for himself, he's probably keeping his eved. Now, what do we see from here? It says Rashi, he always goes free. Doesn't make a difference if he acquired other possessions with him. Could go in Shapirish Hashir, he explicitly said Shashir chutz mekarka ploni dahashdekana atzmo. Certainly in that situation says you can acquire everything except for this land I have in North Dakota, so then it's very clear that you're going to go free in that situation. If he was not kind of other things, he didn't mention anything about land. He always said it was chutz base kur karka. All he said was, I'm going to keep a certain amount of land. The hashno kana shum karka, he doesn't acquire any of the land. Since he said, I'm going to keep 1 acre of property, and only 1 acre, but you don't know which of the 10,000 acres he's keeping for himself, that he's giving everything away to this Eved, so none of it goes to the Eved, because you don't know which of the properties is he referring to that he's keeping. So it must be, we can't relinquish any of this property to the Eved. Even though he doesn't get the land, he'll still go free. Because he is not considered to be karka, v'lo shari, and therefore he was not part of being left over. Alma Pagin Dibura. So therefore we will say that we split. So therefore we see that Rav Shimon holds Pagin Dibura. That just as long as you didn't say a specific property, but you were more general, a core of land. So if you say a core of land, so he doesn't get the land, but he still goes free. So it must be he holds like Pagin Dibura. So therefore it must be that's what Rabbi holds here also. The fact that you made the statement that we say, okay, fine, since you don't have to aid him, so he doesn't get the land, but he still can go free, must be we see he holds like Rav Shimon of Pagin Dibura. Well, Rav Yosef Bar Min Yomi back in the Gemara, Rav Nachman, focusing on the words of Rav Nachman, Afal Pi Shekiles Rabbi Yosi as Rab Shimon, even though Rabbi Yosi praised Rab Shimon, Halacha Rab Meir. The halacha, in fact, is like the shita of Rab Meir. So, what is that? The Sanya we learned Kishenemru Devarim with Rabbi Yosi, when these matters were said in front of Rabbi Yosi, Karl of Hamikra Hazeh, he quoted the following pasuk, Safosayim Yishak Meshiv Devarim Nechaychim, that your lips should kiss these like wonderful answers. So basically, we see clearly that Rav Yossi, even Rav Yossi praised Rav Shimon. That it sounds like Rav Shimon was correct. The halacha is like Rav Meir. Now Rav Meir is the Stam Mishnah over here that we don't say Pagin Dibura. So again, he said everything is yours, but he gets no land, but he can go free. This is Pagin Dibura. That's Rav Shimon holds. So too the case before. But nonetheless, the problem is we hold like Rav Meir that we don't say Pagin Dibura. So this is a little bit problematic that Rabbi is painting himself into a corner where he's saying that the din is we hold Pagin Dibura when we clearly see we don't hold of that. So Rav Nachman really say this, that the halacha is like Rav Meir. If you have a situation of a shchimira, he wrote everything to his Eved. The guy was dying anyway, so I might as well give it to my trusted slave. And Rashi says, so the din is, what happens, let's see the Gemara actually, but Ahmad, and then he gets healthy. So when he gave everything away, he was dying. So he said, what do I need the money for? And all of a sudden he gets healthy and he's fine, so Chayzim and Chasim. But Enu Chayzim Eved. So the din is that he gets all of his possessions back, but he doesn't get his Eved. His Eved goes free. But when it comes to all his possessions, he gets to keep. Chayzer Menachasim Matnesh Chimirahu, because the only reason why he gave it away was because he was dying. And therefore, now that he's healthy, he would never, it was almost like a condition. I'm only giving this to you because I thought I was going to die, which is mashma, if somehow in one in a million I survive, which is what happened, okay, so then I get to keep my things. However, Eino Chayz Be'eved Shar Yotzalav Shem Ben Chayrin, because he gave him this name of being free, says Rashi, V'asl Ishtabid Bo, you can't have him as a slave anymore. So therefore, Amin and Pagin Dibura. So actually, we do see Pagin Dibura, that we split it. We see this by the case of a shchimira. So how could you tell me Rav Nachman says that halachas is a Rav Meir that we don't say Pagin Dibura? We see clear by the case of shchimira that we do say Pagin Dibura. So Elam Rav Ashi Hasam Hainu Taima. The reason why over here is Mishum Delav Kars Gitahu, says Rashi. Says Rashi, Taima Mishum Delav Kars Gitahu. This is not considered to be a complete breaking of this severing of the relationship. The Gabi Ishak Siv Sefer Krisos. We know when it comes to a get, you have to completely remove yourself. You can't have any attachment to her, or else it's not a valid divorce. And we learn that same din when it comes to a woman, from a woman to the din of an Eved, because it says law. It says chup shelo nitan law, uksiv v'kasav law. So therefore, there has to be a complete crease. So says Rashi, when the equal amemar deshaire. So since he left something over, so what do we see? He left over something and shows he doesn't want to give everything to the slave. So maybe he means to exclude the slave and it isn't a krisus. Mashiach came by the shchimira, he does go free, and we do say palhin dibura. Therefore, over here, our case, not the case of the shchimira, but our case that we're talking about, will have krisus gomerhu. It's not considered to be a krisus. Avalecha dolo shir ki hacha havi krisus. So therefore, this is what we're basically saying. We're making this distinction that it's possible that he won't. It's possible that the whole reason over here by the shchimira, so it's a complete krisus. You're completely cutting him off. But over here, since you left something over, it shows you really don't want to give everything to the slave. So therefore, because of that, it's not a complete krisus, and therefore, because of that, he may mean to actually exclude the slave as well, which is why perhaps in that situation he would not go free. Okay. All right, let's look at question 4. So, question. Okay, there's no questions on this one. So let's go weiter. So if there are actually complainers, so then it has to be verified by the signatures. So this is going all the way back to our first Mishnah on Masechta that says that Rabbi Huda's Rameir Omer Akakar Tzisrael maybe get Ber Tzisrael in a Sarach Shem B'Fanei Tam V'Im Yeshulav Oyurim. If there's complainers, and Rashi over here clearly says what the answer is. Shabal Ma'arishu Mazui. If the husband is going to complain that it's forgery, Yiskayim B'Chaismav, then you can verify the signatures. And Rashi there says on the Mishnah, Ein Alav Oyurim, if no one's going to complain, Mastama Kosher, it's probably pretty good. Da B'Kim Lashmav, the same time in the Kaimo. So there's nothing to really worry about if the husband doesn't complain. But if, let's say, the husband does complain, so the Gemara wonders again, that's the maskana. But the question is, how many are actually complaining in this situation? So, only one person is claiming that it's a problem, some stranger off the street. You need 2. The elder train. Okay, fine. So there's 2 people. So Trey trained in who? Why would we rely on one on this group? You should rely on the other group. So 2 against 2. Why would we say that the one group is any better than the other? El Erdabal. We're talking about where the husband complains. Says Rashi, Habal Irer Olav Poisley. So if the husband comes and tries to apostle it, so then you need 2 witnesses to verify the signatures. Question 4. Why are we forced to say this? Because this is if it's one witness in Ira Pachas Mishtayim. You need to have 2 people that are going to complain. If there's 2, so my chasnas is Samchas Ahani. Why are you trusting these 2 over these 2? Okay. Let's see the next Mishnah. Mastis. Hamevi get min benina siyam. So you have a person that brings a get from another country, in which typically you have to say b'fanei nechtav, but there's one slight problem. They can't do it. We'll see why. Of Adim. So if there are witnesses, Yiskan b'chaisma. So you have to verify the signatures. This is actually we saw already previously in Daf Daled. And then the Mishnah concludes, Echad Gittin Nashim, Echad Shechrurei Avadim. When it comes to either type of document, for a woman going free from with a divorce document, or a slave going free with an emancipation proclamation, Shavu Moechamevi, as we said already on the previous Amud, that they're equal in regard to having to say b'fanei nechtav. This is one of the ways. We're going to see in today's daf other ways that they are the same. So let's see this Gemara, which we already know the answer to. So my inu yachal loimer. What does it mean you can't say it? He's deaf mute. So cherish bar asui gitahu is not allowed to bring a get to begin with. But not a kolkshen will have a get. The cherish is not allowed to bring a get. He's not allowed to be a shliach because they're considered to not have das. Says Rashi, she'ein behen das. So Omer Rav Yosef hakmayaskin kagain shenasnu la kashupikech. You gave it to him when he was healthy, he could hear and he could speak. However, while he was en route, he became a deaf mute, and therefore that's the reason why he can't say it. So the shlichus was a good shlichus. However, once now he just practically can't say it, so then we have to verify the signatures. So we say that you have to say b'fana nechtav. So Tanrabanan, this is going to be TA7. How are these two the same? In three ways. First of all, Shavul Mochamevi, as we already established, that they're the same, you have to say b'fana nechtav. Also, the whole get sheishalav eid kuti puzzle. When it comes to any document in which the signature, because Rashi says kol get is kol shtar. Again, get and shtar are really interchangeable. So any document in which it was signed by a kuti, so that's a problem. Chutz me Gittin noshim shchuri avadim. For some reason, when we're going to discuss why, when it comes to Gittin noshim shchuri avadim, we will accept apparently the signature of an eid kuti, even though typically we won't. And then finally, the whole hashtaros, as we continue to Testament Bay, is any document oilim bi'arkois that are made and being processed. Shel Ovid Chachavim, says Rashi, shenasu hashtaros alidei based in Shel Ovid Chachavim. So if you have a court in your city, which is not a Jewish court, so all these documents are acceptable. Even if the signatures on these documents are not even Jewish people that signed it, Sharon. All documents are accepted. If you have a bill of sale, you purchase a home, you don't have to have go to a basin for that, and you don't need a Jewish signatures for this. Those are the exceptions, that when it comes to a get, and when it comes to Shchorei Avadim, it does need to be with, it cannot be signatures from Ovid Chacham. Ukadiri Rameir Arba. Actually, Rameir brings a fourth comparison. Ha'omer, a person says, this is going to be question 10. Rameir ba'arba mahu haravi sheshavu Rameir. So what is the fourth one that Rameir compares to? This is question 5. So the following case: Ha'omer tein get zel ishti. A person says, I want you to give this get to my wife, which he's allowed to do. He's allowed to have a shliach. Ushtar shecher zel abdi, or the same thing if you want to give a document to free your slave. So Ratzel Lachsa B'Shneim Yachzer Div Rameir. While this person is walking to them, before the shliach physically gives over these documents, so according to Rameir, they're both the same. You could always retract, even though it was already written, it was already given over to the shliach. That shliach does not accept it on behalf of those people. However, Bishlam or Rabbanan. So that's the thing. Now I can understand Rabbanan. Minyana Limuti Had Rameir. Now, it mentions 3. Why does that to mention 3? We can count the cases and figure out there's 3 cases. The fact that it mentions 3 is coming, this is in many places, beginning of Kedushin, always says, the fact that it has a number, what is Minyano Muti Mai? What's it coming to exclude? So, according to Rabbanan, it makes sense. They must disagree with this case. They must hold the dinim are not the same when it comes to the situation of being able to retract. So, that makes sense. So it must be that there's another case that Rameir excludes. So he comes to exclude the following. Actually, let's slow down before we see it. Let's look at this Rashi. So Yachsor, why can you retract? The Ksav Rameir hefsid v'choiv hein l'oiso shenishluchu lehen ve'en choven adam el b'fanav. In both of these situations, there is an element of a loss for the woman, and also, interestingly enough, for the slave. And therefore, we say in chavan ela b'fanav. Therefore, the shliach is his shliach; it's not her shliach or the slave shliach. V'rabban pligal et Rameir. The Rabban said, no, that doesn't make any sense. When it comes to a slave, as soon as you give it over to your shliach, you can't change your mind. Once you give it over to the shliach, even though the Eved didn't actually make this other guy into a shliach, he's happy to go free. And therefore, he wants to go free, and therefore it can be done even not in front of him. He's doing him a favor. He certainly would be happy to have a shliach in order for him to go free. Now, it's interesting, the Rameir, for some reason, holds that a person would rather somehow, some reason, wish to remain an Eved, which we'll discuss why. But again, what is this coming to exclude? What's the distinction between a get and an Eved Shechor when it comes to the Shita of Rav Meir? So again, that's question 5. Question 5, it says over here, Shel Rav Meir, the Omer Tenu get O Shechor Chayzer, Chachamim B'Shechor Eno Chayzer, the Schus Hiloi V'Zachalo Shliach, as we saw in Rashi. So question 6. So again, according to the Rabbanan, it's coming to exclude this case, and to Rav Meir, it's coming to exclude the following. Can you imagine? You have witnesses that don't know how to sign. They can't sign a name. So what do? What we do is we carve out on the papers like some smooth paper, and they basically fill in the engravings with ink. So that's how they'll be able to have everything written. We're only going to be lenient when it comes to Gittin Nashim. Why? Why are we lenient when it comes to Gittin Nashim? It's such a serious situation. It says Rashi, Mishum Tekanas Agunos. Shema Yiratze Zeh Megarish Lefarish Miyom. Omasukin Shiraitza Shul Tizachal Yavam. So this is her chance to get divorced with this document. So the one issue is you have a guy that doesn't know how to sign document. We're going to do whatever we can to make sure it gets signed. We'll do this interesting thing of carving it out, and he'll fill in the holes, if you will. Because we don't want her to remain in Guna. He may end up leaving the country and he will never produce another get. Or he may end up dying and then she'll be Zakak Yavam. Why should we do that? She goes for free. So Ushar kol hashtaros im yodim likros lachtoim chaisman be in love in chaisman. The heter, the kula, is only because of an aguna. We don't care necessarily about these other documents, and therefore it has to be done properly. So therefore we see even Rav Meir holds a distinction when it comes to that. To kriyaman dakar shmei. What does it mean read? We didn't mention about reading. We talked about signing. So there was actually something missing. If they don't know how to read karin lifneim, we'll read the document in front of them, v'chaismin, and sign it. V'she'en yoidim lachtaim, if they don't even know how to sign it, mikarin lehem, and then we'll end up doing this trick, if you will, to be able to get them to know how to sign. Okay. Yeah. So actually, TA7 was the same thing. B'shloish devarim shiva Gittin Nashim shchori avadim eluhein. So we said regarding Sebafan and Nachtafan and Nachtam, and Eid Kusi, as well as the document of Kachan. So that was the same. Question 8, TB8, which I think is the same question as question 6. Begimel Durachim Shiba Gittin Nashim Shchori Avadim V'Dur Meir B'Arba Mahu Haravi Sheshavu Rameir Minedu Rameil Miutimai. So let me see what I wrote. Lefi Rameir Im Nasan Hashtar Shechor Im Adon Yochel Lachser. I should say Im Shliach maybe. Yochel Lach. This is me writing it. Lefnei Shenaisan Ezel Eved, before it was given to the slave. Mishvil Hamachlokas Im Zchus Choy or Chol Chov Le'Eved. Is a Zchus or Chov Le'Eved Ein Choy V'Nel B'Fanav. And then the other one is Hamispar Lemiyute Edim She'enam Yoidim Lichta V'Lachta V'Anachnu Choyke V'Hem Milo Es Hamilim. They fill up the words. Okay. All right. So that was TB8. Let's put this over here. Similar question. TB. Okay. So let's continue with the 2 dots. Asu Leika. You're telling me that's it? These are the only ways that they're compared. To new get zel ishti. If a person says, give this get to my wife. Ushtar shecher zel avdi. Give this get to my wife. Give this get to my wife. Give this shtar shecher to my slave umes. And then all of a sudden dies. So the din is lo yitnu lachamisa. So it doesn't work, because it cannot be given after he has died. Now let's look at Rashi. Even according to the shita of the Rabbanan who say that he cannot retract once he gives it to the shliach. Nehi dilahachi zachabe. In that situation, the shliach was zaycha for that person. Dolo matzil mehedar. Miyu ma'oid Rabban. He'll agree here. The whole kamadul mata gitol yade. The get actually never got into his hands. Lo habi mishochar. It was actually, he only said it, but he physically didn't receive the get. The shliach didn't actually physically get the document. Kivan demes koidim, since he died first, sulo havi shechruri shecher, he can't go free. The nafkali reshusi minei v'chayel leha reshus yarshim. So it ends up, the yarshim are acquired. Back in the Gemara. So yinu lachmisa. Tenu man laploini, give money to so-and-so. And Rashi says, Divrei shchimira ksubim k'masurin damu. When a person is dying, even though he doesn't have it written down, we just accept his words as is. Umei stitnu lachar misa. So in that situation, we say that it is given to him after misa because it doesn't have to be written down. So how's that a question? Because we see that again we compare get to an eved regarding this case of a shchimira. So why do we mention that? So when it says kikatan emil said delays mishtaros. We only are mentioning things that don't apply to other shtaros. Mil said the isi mishtaros lokatani. But when it comes to other documents as well, we don't mention it. In other words, it's not just shtar shecher. It's when it comes to all documents. Says Rashi, she'im moser shtar matana l'shlucho. If let's say you give a gift, a document of a gift, litnu lacher misa umeis litin lacher misa. This doesn't apply only to a get and to a shtar shecher. It's any document that if it wasn't physically given over, it doesn't work. So we only want to make comparisons of these two things that are only these two things and not everything else. So that's the answer. You're right. There are other ways that they're the same, but they're not exclusively the same in going against everything else. Because over here, Milsa the isi b'shtaros l'katani. There's laws that apply to other documents as well. Deshalach Rabbi Mishmei de Rabbi Avoy. He sent the following: Havi yoidim sheshalach Rabbi Lezer l'goyla mishum Rabbeinu. That he sent the following in the name of Rabbeinu. The following: Shchiv mira. You have a person who's dying. She'omar, he says, quote, Kisvu tenu mana l'ploini. Write. He also says write and give money to Pliny. Umeis, and then the guy dies. So the din is ein kaisin meisin. We don't write it and we don't give it. Why? Shemalu gamerlak naisa el b'shtar. The fact that he mentioned kasav, he doesn't have to say kasav, but the fact that he said it makes it more problematic now. It must be that he actually said, he was saying, I don't want it to be my words alone. It needs to be written down. And since he mentioned that, and it wasn't yet written down and given to this guy, then shtar lachar misa. Fine. So that is, again, another a proof that that's how we see that this is the din. That it's not exclusive to an eved and to a woman. I have equal lishma. How about when it comes to lishma? Now, lishma, that's equal to Gittin nashim shchori avadim only. Now, bishlam l'rabba hainu mo'ech hamevi. That's one of the cases. Mo'ech hamevi is, you have to say b'fanei nechta because of lishma. El Rava Kasha, according to Rava, who says that the whole reason why we say, again, according to Rava, it makes sense because he says the whole takana mo'ech hamevi is because it be a kin lishma. So how about Rava? Masu bein lo Rava bein lo Rava ha'ika mechuber. There definitely is the din of mechuber. What's that? As we saw already. Let's look at Rashi. The pasal b'tavayu. You can't write a document on a tree. The ksiv v'kasav v'nasan. It has to be written and then immediately be able to be given. Yishena mechuser el kasiv v'nasina. So it can't be that you can write it then cut it down. You have to first have it cut down, then you write it and then give it. It has to be kasav v'nasan. So again, we see clearly other ways that they're the same. For instance, kikatani psula d'Rabbanan, d'Oraisa lokatani. We're only mentioning a psul of the Rabbanan. So as we said, mo'ech hamevi, this is a takana d'Rabbanan. Eid kusi is possible with the Rabbanan. Bishtar shtaros. Same thing when it comes to these other documents. These are all dini d'Rabbanan. However, lishma, which is sourced from the Torah itself, we don't need to mention it. Because why would we need to mention something which is already, let's call it a davar yadua from the Torah? So therefore, we're only mentioning cases which are d'Rabbanan. 1 second. Are all these cases d'Rabbanan? But our kais shel ev kachavim, when it comes to having a non-Jewish court, having a non-Jewish person sign on a get, the psula deraisahu v'katani, that's not a durabanan, that's a deraisa. Be'edi masira, so the answer is, we're talking about edi masira. Ukra beleza, derma edi masira karti, says Rashi. Masnisa demakshir b'shar shtaros, upasal bahani, the reason why we're saying that other documents it's okay, but it's possible when it comes to a get, could go to ika edi masira, is because they're already edi masira. So what? Says Rashi, v'ein sar chalachtoim beget. According to him, he doesn't say edi chasima karti, he holds edi masira, it's the giving over, which means technically, even if a get doesn't even have any signatures, it's still fine. It says Rashi, masnisan b'shekasvu sefer Yisrael, it actually was a get which was written by a yid, b'ashmina masnisan demoider b'lezir b'mezuyv metaycho, we know that it doesn't have to be signed, but it can't be signed improperly. B'chasimas edem sulim shu posel. Even though, again, technically speaking, all you need to do is have witnesses that it's been given over. You don't need to even care about the signatures. But once you do sign it, it has to be signed properly. And therefore, you may end up relying on these signatures and start saying Edi Chasima Karti below Edi Masira, even without Edi Masira. And that would be a huge problem, because these are definitely not good signatures. So technically, Edi Masira should work. Midoraisa, it should be a good get. However, in the event that they signed it, people who are apostle, Midrabanan, we're going to say it doesn't work. So again, this is all in accordance to the Shita of Rabbi Lezer holds Edi Masira Karti. I have in Tani Seifa, Reb Shimon Oimer. At the end, it says Reb Shimon holds Af Elu Ksherim, that these are also good. Says Rashi, Gittin Nashim Ksherim b'chaismin of Kachavim. Even if non-Jews sign this document, it's good. Yom Rav Zera, and Rav Zera said, Yored Rav Shimon l'shitasol shebelezer. Actually, he's going in accordance to the Shita Rabbi Lezer, Yomer Edi Masira Karti, Mechalad Tanakama Savrlo. So, how does that make sense? Look at Rashi. Mechalad Tanakama Savrlo, Karti Edi Masira El Edi Chasima, Absuli Deraisahi. So it's a absul deraisa. As we continue Yudam and Aleph, so ikibinayu shemos move hakim. The difference is when it comes to the names. If they're clear that these are names that are signed, are non-Jewish names, that's where it could become problematic. In other words, really everyone holds it's Edi Masira Karti. So it's really only totally on it being given over. The signatures don't really matter. However, it's obvious that this, in the case where it's obvious that this is an akum, let's say it's Christopher is his name over there, and in that situation we're not going to be saimich on these chasimos. Look at Rashi. They are going in the sheet of Rabbi Lezer. The only issue of these signatures is only the Rabbanan. Because you may end up relying on the signatures, and you're not going to end up having any Edi Masira. The Asr of Shimon Memory says, Im Shemos move Hakim, you know for a fact these are non-Jews that are signing it. Shen Yisrael Nikroim Ba'oiso Shemos, these are names that are not Jews. Lav Hainu Mezuh Matoichai. That's not an issue. The Moeder Belezer, the Kol Yalma Yadid the Avikachavim Haim, will also Misach Alayo the Edi Masira. So you're not going to be afraid that you're going to rely on these signatures, because you're going to know that these are not valid signatures. If you know they're not valid signatures, then we're going to therefore definitely require Edi Masira. So that is the machlokas, whether or not in the cases of Shemus Move Hakim, whether or not that is good enough for you to be able to say, okay, it must be Edi Masira is okay, and therefore this get is okay, even though it was signed. So the truth is, again, technically, we may hold Edi Masira Karti, but the whole question of whether or not there's even a psul d'Rabbanan is whether you have to make this gezerah when you have Shemus Muhakim. So we say, okay, but we mentioned before the case of Chazara. Can he retract? Can he change his mind while the shliach is giving this get? El Katani Milsa the Leis B'Kedushin. The Milsa the Yisra B'Kedushin Lo Katani. So we only want to mention something in which does not pertain to Kedushin, but this Chazar could be done when it comes to Kedushin. Says Rashi, Milsa de Leisa B'Kedushin. Kloimer, Ki parchinal el ha'ika mechuber l'shma. We mentioned all these different things. Lo tishni psul deraisa lo katani el ema milsa isa b'kedushin lo katani. The reason why we don't, this is actually a different answer. We don't want to mention anything in which also has to do with kedushin. Kigon l'shma, mechuber, isa nami b'shtar kedushin. A shtar kedushin also needs to be written l'shma. And it also v'yotza mebeisa v'oisel ishacher hiskusha havayotzi. We can make a hekesh, marriage and divorce. So therefore, you are not allowed to have a kedusha shtar kesser shtar bia. You can give a shtar from kedushin, but it has to be written l'shma. So because of that, we don't want to mention that connection of l'shma, even though it's true. It has to be written an evid and this, because we're talking about documents that will remove the person. B'fanei nechtav leis b'kedushin. To say b'fanei nechtav has nothing to do with kedushin. That's why that's mentioned. That the kanta de rabbana be'alma he begittin ba'alma. It's only when it comes to gittin dilma asli ba'alma ara pasali, because maybe the husband will say it's a forged shtar. The aid kusi nami edu kashi b'kedushin. When it comes to an aid kuti, he's not able to use that person as for kedushin, but he is allowed for gittin. Skipping a few lines. The archos nami leis b'kedushin. Also, when it comes to these Jewish courts, we don't apply this also when it comes to kedushin as well. Okay, skipping. That's when it comes to again. Kedushin kivandim midaraisa mikudeshes. When it comes to midaraisa, she's divorced. Mishum edim asira iyamrit edim mikudeshes sharisei shasish ba'alma. Okay. So on this, Gemara asks a question: Chazara gufa is kedushin, but Chazara does apply kedushin. Look in Rashi. She'im maser shtar kedushin l'shlucho. If you give a shtar kedushin to a shliach to give to a woman, v'ratza lachzer chayzer, you could retract. Dein kan zchusula. It's not necessarily schus. Diaser kol yalma, because right now she's able to marry anyone she wants, and then when you give that get, she's going to be usher to everyone. And also, this shtar alone, she won't be chai, you're not going to be chai to give her mazonos yet. Gemara says b'shlichus bal karcha. So Gemara says b'shlichus bal karcha. The begerishin isa b'kedushin leisa. When it comes to shlichus bal karcha, says Rashi, kaloimer dumid gittin lo mishkachas lo. We don't find it similar kedushin to gittin. Da shliach zeh mishtalech etzel garsha bal karcha. Because this shliach is being sent to divorce her against her will. So too the slave is being freed against his will. You can't make a shliach to have her accept kedushin by her will. It has to be with her das. That's a shliach again by force. That it has to happen. The imrotza habal chayzer mashen kin b'kedushin. The avon of chayzer will do minahani klal. So that's why it's not similar. I'm going to stop here. Let's look at a couple questions. Question 6 we saw the lemute mai. Question 7 we did. Ha'im yesh psul mechuber b'shtar kedushin. Is there an issue when it comes to that? Yesh psul mechuber b'shtar kedushin, as we saw in Rashi, because we make a hekesh. Maser shtar kedushin l'shlucho im yachol lachzer bo. And the answer is yes, you can be chayzer because it's not something which is accepted bal karchai anyway. Ad kan.